Hello, and welcome back to Overbooked. I'm Amanda, and today we're going to be doing my May wrap-up. Obviously, it is now, June 14th, so this is a little late, but there was a lot of other things going on that made me not want to do the May wrap-up right away. In particular, the Black Lives Matter movement right now going on in result of the killing of George Floyd and the situation where Breonna Taylor was killed a couple months ago, and those cops still aren't charged, so cool. I have posted a couple videos since everything, but I just haven't gotten around to the May wrap-up, so this is what we're gonna do today. And May was actually Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, so I participated in the Asian read-along, readathon, that is hosted by Read with Cindy. And I don't know if she really finished it, so I don't really know if all of the things that were planned actually happened, and maybe I also just didn't follow along well enough. So for the Asian readathon, there was 4 prompts, and then there was a bonus prompt where you read the book Little Fires Everywhere as a group, and then they did a watch along where they watched the show together. I'm not quite sure that ever happened, so I don't know. I have read Little Fires Everywhere, and I have a book review on it, and I have a Hulu reaction to the first 3 episodes to the show that I did, so you can check those out. So I'll share some thoughts on those books, but let's go to the books I actually read for the month of May. The first book I read was Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. This is a mystery, thriller, slow burn, contemporary fiction novel, and it was amazing. I was here for it. This was a really, really good book. So since the whole coronavirus thing has been happening, I haven't been able to check out books from my library, so I've been using the digital resources through my library like Hoopla, Libby, and I listened to this. Oh, actually, I splurged and also got the free month trial to Scribd, which is an audiobook app, and then I just paid $10 for the next month. So I probably will cancel that eventually, but for now I think it's kind of useful since I can't check out books. But anyways, so I listened to this on audiobook. I wish I could have actually read the physical book. I think this would have been a lot better reading it, the physical copy, but regardless, I still really, really enjoyed it. There was a lot of things happening. There is I forgot what it was called. I don't know if you guys do this. There's a tweet the other day on Twitter where I read a book, finish it, and then sit down to write the review, and I forget everyone's names. That happens to me every time. So the book centers around this facility that's a oxygen chamber, and it's set up by this Korean immigrant family, and it's supposed to help heal certain conditions. And a lot of the people who go there have children with cerebral palsy or autism or just other kind of situations. And then there's also an older man, well, not older, but he's middle-aged, and he is having fertility issues. And so he also is using the oxygen chamber, and it's supposed to give you extra oxygen to fight those conditions and heal you. And you're supposed to be seeing improvement. At one point, the oxygen chamber explodes, and there are people in it. So there is 2 deaths, and then the characters of the book have to kind of figure out what happened and essentially deal with the fallout of this explosion, because their lives explode. This was such a complicated, intriguing story because you have so many viewpoints, and it was done really, really well. I don't really think that a lot of people could pull this off. You gotta hear a lot of perspectives. You gotta hear the family who started the oxygen chambers perspective. You gotta hear the father, the mother, the daughter, all of their perspectives. You gotta hear a lot of the parents' perspectives that brought their kids to this chamber. And then you got to hear the man who was, not fertile, and his perspective on going there, and his wife's perspective. You heard everyone's perspective, and it was so great because I love hearing all the characters' perspective, because a lot of the times when you're reading the book, you're like, well, what is that other character thinking? We have no idea. And in this case, it was actually really helpful because it was essentially a mystery book that you were reading. And when you were reading one character's perspective, you were like, oh, I know what happened. This is for sure what happened. And then all of a sudden you would start hearing somebody else's perspective, and you'd be like, no, what? And your whole like outlook would change. I was guessing the entire time and I couldn't figure it out until they presented it to me. And I actually had a friend text me yesterday and she was like, "Did you read Miracle Creek? It was nuts." And I was like, "Yeah, the ending was wild. It's a wild, wild ride. So buckle up, get to read in Miracle Creek, and hands down, because there's no funny business happening, you're gonna wanna like stay focused because it's nuts. I highly recommend." Okay, so the next book that I read was The Kiss Quotient by Helen Wong, and this is the like romance book, and it's kind of like a fluffier book, and I wanted to read this because it's been on my TBR for a while, and the rest of the books that I did for the Asian Readathon were kind of like depressing, not a lot of happy thoughts, so I really wanted to just take a little breather before I got into the next two. This book was really lovely. I loved it. It was about a character who has Asperger's, and she's terrible in social situations, and she's like nearing 30. She's great at her career. She makes a ton of money, and the only thing is like she doesn't think that she's great at sex, and she wants to get better. So she hires a male prostitute and in order to practice and get better. And they end up like doing this whole like arrangement thing where they're in like this I don't want to call it a contract, but they're like, all right, well, we're gonna do like it's like a course. She like takes a course. He like sets up a class for her. So he like, over these next like 3 weeks, we're gonna like take you through French kissing, like cuddling and blah, blah, blah. And we all know where this is leading to. Like I don't want to spoil it, but I think we could all guess what happens at the end. It was lovely. I loved this book. It was so like just tender, and it is I can own voices book because the author has autism or Asperger's. Let me double check. Yes, so the author has autism, so she's very familiar with, you know, the conditions of Asperger's and autism. So I really appreciated that, and there was some points where I was like, I don't really know what this would happen if somebody had autism or Asperger's, but I trusted that she knew what she was writing about because she has it, so I'm not going to question her. It was just lovely. Also, this book is really, really steamy. Oh, man. I love a good steam. You guys, sometimes I'm like, is it fucking hot in here? Or like, do I need to go grab Chandler? Because it's too hot to handle. So then the next one I read was The Mountain Sing, and I knew how to pronounce this author's name, and I can't remember now. Nam Pang Quay Ma, and she is Vietnamese, and it is a multi-generational story that takes place in Vietnam, leading up to the Vietnam War and kind of after. So I thought that this was extremely interesting because I think that a lot of times, especially in America, this sun is like right here. We're gonna do maybe like this. You can see my super messy bookshelf and my puzzle table. So I think this book was just really interesting because I think that in America we get, I think we get a super watered down version of America's history. We don't get straight facts all the time. We get like, I think we get facts. I think we get just a sprinkling of facts that we want people to know and remember, and that's kind of it. So we don't really get a lot of other countries' perspective. And maybe America should take a note from Miracle Creek and just add more perspectives because that gives us a better picture of what's happening in the world. Anyways, so this was like the perspective from the Vietnamese, and all the characters live in Vietnam, and we start with, so there's two main characters, and it's a granddaughter and a grandmother. And so we start with the grandmother's childhood, and then we kind of go back and forth to the granddaughter's life, and then kind of just interweave, like the story leads up and then goes back to like the present time and then goes forward. So it was a really like interesting time frame, which was a bit confusing at times, but after you got like really into the book, it was pretty easy to figure out. This was another book that I really wish I would have read the physical copy because there are so many characters, and even though the audiobook was nice because the narrator was obviously saying all their names correctly, so I would know like, okay, this is actually how you pronounce their name, I kind of really got lost in who was being talked about. So I wish that I could have had the physical copy and I would have known, okay, there was somebody else being talked about, because there was just so many aunts and uncles and siblings. It was just really hard to keep track of. And I think the only really part that I got, I guess, really like lost in keeping track of was when the granddaughter and grandmother are waiting for people to come home from the war. And they kept saying so many people's names, and I kind of got lost on who had come back and who hadn't. And that was just probably my own thing. I probably just wasn't paying attention. That's just the reason I just don't like audiobooks, is it's hard to like make sure I'm paying attention and getting everything, and I think that I miss a lot of things when I'm listening to it versus reading the book. But this was really beautifully written, and it was a really powerful story and really eye-opening for me, because again, like I said, I've never really heard the Vietnamese perspective on the Vietnam War, and there's just a lot of things that I think would make a lot more sense to people. Like, even if we just took a second without even reading or, you know, hearing somebody's perspective, it's like you're in somebody's country, killing their people, invading their land. How do you think they feel? They're not going to be super grateful to you. The lengths that people had to go to survive, it's like another thing too. It's like, even if these people don't want to have this like person in power in their country, it's not like really they have a choice. They're making decisions based on what is going to get them through the day, and not on like what America wants them to decide. And there was also just a lot of like shitty Americans. Like, there's this part where like the Americans treat ladies super unwell, and that's like not cool. It really just gives you perspective, like, okay, we weren't the good guys. There was no winning here. But I really enjoyed it, and if you guys haven't read it, I would highly suggest it. Okay, so the last one that I read for the Asian Readathon and for the month of May was The Leavers by Lisa Ko, and this was probably my favorite book that I read for the Readathon. I got this book from a recommendation from Moulin Rouge, and I'll link her below. She had a whole video on like all the books by Asian authors, Asian characters, and this was one of them, and I just was like, that sounds fascinating. And it was actually on my want to read list on Goodreads anyways, so perfect. This was a really, really just powerful book, and it made me cry multiple times. This follows the story of Deming and his mother and her journey to the United States. So Deming lives with his mother in the United States until he's about 11, and then she goes to work one day and then just never returns. And it's kind of thought that she just doesn't want to be his mother anymore. There was like, or she just doesn't want to be in the situation that they are. Because before she went to work, she was talking about, you know, moving to Florida, starting a new job, trying to start over. So he has to go into foster care and then is adopted by a white family. And this white family essentially kind of strips him of his Chinese culture, which was really like hard to read. And I think that we're having a lot of conversations about microaggressions right now, and this family was like the prime example of microaggressions. There were so many small comments that affected Demi's life forever and like made him think about how he acted or reacted. The main thing that I think was just really hard was they essentially, after they officially adopted him, gave him the name Daniel. So he lost his Chinese name. And even though like I think he kind of reclaims it later, he still always has Daniel with a certain amount of people in his life. That's just, he's always gonna be Daniel to them. He almost feels like he's like two different people, which I could see. And then you just hear this, like, you hear Deming's side of the story, but then you also hear his mother's side of the story, how when she was in China, she, you know, like worked at this factory, struggled to make money for her father, and then decided to come to America to make even more money, hopefully, and then found out that she was pregnant when she was in America. And it's just this thing where like you kind of can't really ever like get to the next rung of the ladder. You're always stuck on this one rung, and then it's just like this cycle that the whole like pull yourself up from the bootstraps thing that America's very like proud of is just not possible. It's not possible for many, many people and the majority of people. And so at one point, which I thought was a really powerful statement, we're hearing the perspective from Deming's mother, and she was talking to her boyfriend, and she said that like their life in America, like in their crammed apartment with their crappy jobs, is almost the same as if they just would have stayed in the village in China. And I almost was just like, how devastating would that be? Like, you work so hard every day to make it here, and it's like you didn't even move an inch, and you're away from everybody you know and your culture you know. So it was a really, really just powerful book. There was so many powerful statements, both from Deming and his mother, and I just really, really, really loved it. It was a really, really good book. You should read it. And then, I didn't read it, but I've already read it. Little Fires Everywhere was the, like, buddy read or, like, the group read. I think this is a really good book. If you guys haven't checked it out, it's been everywhere. It's now a Hulu series. So if you guys haven't read it, you should. And check out my review to find out what it's all about. So that was my May wrap-up. I only read 4 books, but it's okay. We're getting there. So in the past couple of videos, I've been trying to put links down below for organizations that you can donate to for Black Lives Matter. And I've been putting the Detroit Justice Center down there because that's an organization that's local to me. I've also been putting the Black Visions Collective in Minnesota. But I highly encourage you to look at organizations that are local to your area, because I feel like those probably are going to be doing the most impact for you. So make sure that you just kind of like look into some organizations that are near and dear to you, that are local, because I think that it's very important to support these huge organizations and you know, get behind them. But I also think it's important to start revolutions in your own neighborhood and make sure that people that are trying to do good around you are also supported. And make sure you're also looking at the people who are running protests. Make sure you can, if there's a way that you can help out them, try to do that as well. I know that Chandler and I went to a protest last week, and it was run by 2 amazing organizations that were female run. There was one that I was really impressed with. They're all college girls, and I was like, you guys are amazing. And they were taking donations and just to keep going, just to keep the protest moving. So just kind of pay attention to other organizations that are really close to home. I know there's a lot of attention on like the Minnesota Freedom Fund they're not taking donations anymore. And just all these other big ones that have been going around. But I just highly encourage you to look around your neighborhood, see where you can help out there as well. And with that, I think that's it. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys next time.